Toshiba lost $6 billion in a single year. And the craziest part? It all started with a secret buyout. For over a century, Toshiba was more than just a brand. It was the absolute beating heart of Japan's economic miracle. This was the powerhouse that built the world's first mass-market laptop, pioneering flash memory, and inventing the revolutionary color television technology that defined an entire generation. To the public, Toshiba stood as an unshakable monument of quality, safety, and futuristic innovation. But behind the polished glass facade of their Tokyo headquarters, a terrifying culture of intense pressure, financial manipulation, and absolute obedience was festering. To understand how this industrial titan self-destructed, we have to look inside the toxic corporate hierarchy that ruled the company. In the early 2000s, Toshiba's top executives were trapped in a fierce, silent war. A succession of fiercely competitive CEOs, including Atsutoshi Nishida and Norio Sasaki, fostered a climate of absolute terror. In the Japanese corporate world, losing face is worse than death. Within Toshiba, this psychological fear was weaponized through a system known internally as the challenge. The challenge was not an invitation to innovate. It was a direct, inescapable command from the highest offices to achieve impossible profit targets within ridiculously short time frames. When a CEO handed down a challenge to a division manager, there was no room for debate. You did not explain that the market was down, or that competitors were cheaper. To argue was to commit career suicide. So, managers did the only thing they could to survive. They lied. They began abusing an accounting method known as the percentage of completion method for long-term projects. If a massive infrastructure project was falling behind or losing money, managers simply estimated that the work was going perfectly, booking artificial future profits today. They delayed recording massive losses, pushing them into the next quarter, and then the quarter after that, praying for a miracle that would never come. Over a 7-year period, this toxic cycle created a phantom empire, inflating Toshiba's operating profits by a staggering $1.2 billion. But a mirage cannot last forever. In 2015, a courageous whistleblower finally exposed the systemic fraud. The resulting investigation shattered Japan's business community. The world watched in shock as Toshiba's top executives, including the CEO, stood before a wall of flashing cameras, bending their bodies into a deep, 90-degree bow of absolute shame. It was a public execution of the brand's reputation. Yet, as devastating as the accounting scandal was, it was merely a symptom of a much deeper, far more lethal disease. The real threat was a ticking time bomb ticking away across the Pacific Ocean, in the nuclear energy sector of the United States. In 2006, Toshiba had made a monumental strategic gamble. Seeing the decline of their consumer electronics business against cheap rivals from China and South Korea, Toshiba decided to pivot to heavy infrastructure. They bought a majority stake in Westinghouse Electric, a legendary American nuclear power pioneer, for $5.4 billion. Toshiba's leadership was convinced that a global nuclear renaissance was coming, fueled by the rising demand for clean, zero-carbon energy. They outbid rivals like General Electric by paying a massive premium. They believed they would lock down long-term, high-margin construction contracts to build state-of-the-art AP1000 nuclear reactors all over the globe. It seemed like a stroke of pure genius. Then, on March 11, 2011, the Earth shook. A massive magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck the coast of Japan, triggering a colossal tsunami. The wall of water slammed into the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant, causing catastrophic meltdowns. The world watched in horror as radioactive steam leaked into the atmosphere. Almost overnight, the global consensus on nuclear energy flipped from clean savior to existential threat. Germany immediately announced the complete shutdown of its nuclear program. Other countries froze planned reactor projects. The global market for new nuclear construction completely evaporated. But Toshiba and Westinghouse were already deeply locked into fixed-price, multi-billion-dollar contracts to build nuclear reactors in Georgia and South Carolina. This is where the dream transformed into a financial horror story. Because of the Fukushima disaster, safety regulations for nuclear construction in the United States skyrocketed. Regulatory bodies demanded redesigns, extra safety barriers, and endless inspections. Every single change delayed construction. Every day of delay cost millions of dollars in labor and idle equipment. Because the contracts were fixed price, Westinghouse had to bear the brunt of these escalating costs, not the utility companies. To try and regain control of the spiraling projects, Westinghouse made a desperate move in late 2015. They bought their main construction partner, CB&I Stone & Webster, thinking that owning the entire supply chain would speed up the work. But wait. It gets worse. When Westinghouse closed the deal, they realized they had bought a Trojan horse. Stone & Webster's books were an absolute mess. They had hidden billions of dollars in unrecognized construction liabilities, late fees, and massive disputes with subcontractors. Instead of solving their problems, Toshiba had just inherited a financial black hole. The cost overruns on the American nuclear plants were no longer just millions, they were billions of dollars. By late 2016, the situation was completely unsustainable. The losses from the U.S. nuclear projects were so massive they could no longer be hidden by clever accounting tricks. The reality was catastrophic. Toshiba was facing a write-down so large it threatened to completely wipe out the company's entire shareholder equity, pushing the century-old Japanese giant into technical bankruptcy. In early 2017, the hammer fell. Toshiba officially announced that it was taking a monstrous $6.3 billion write-down on its nuclear business. Westinghouse filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection to shield what was left of its assets. But the damage to Toshiba was already fatal. Under Tokyo Stock Exchange rules, if a company has negative net worth at the end of the fiscal year, it faces automatic delisting. For a proud giant like Toshiba, being kicked off the stock exchange would be the ultimate disgrace, cutting them off from the credit markets and triggering a final, messy collapse. They were running out of time. They had to act. The board met in a state of absolute panic. The banks demanded blood. To survive, Toshiba had to do the unthinkable, sell off its crown jewel. They were forced to spin off and sell their highly profitable flash memory chip division, the very technology they had helped invent, to a consortium led by Bain Capital. They sold off their medical systems unit. They sold off their television business to Hisense. They sold their home appliance business to Midea. The proud pioneer of Japanese technology was systematically dismantled. Strip-mined. Sold to foreign competitors for pennies on the dollar. Left as a shadow of its former self, Toshiba was eventually taken private in 2023, ending its 74-year history as a public company. If you thought this corporate self-destruction was shocking, wait until you watch our video on how General Electric destroyed its own $100 billion empire.